Welcome in, everybody. It is Tuesday, December 10th. Indiana is officially in the 12-team college football playoff. They are the number 10 seed and will play at Notre Dame next Friday, 8 p.m. kickoff in South Bend. It'll be a chilly one. Ticket prices, you need to basically pay an arm and a leg to get into the stadium right now. So we'll see how many IU fans actually are able to get into the stadium. Matt Weaver here, Peegs.com, Jared Kelly here to talk through the CFP. And then obviously the transfer portal just opened up yesterday on Monday. So we'll take a look at that a little bit too and who IU might be targeting, who might be leaving IU, stuff like that. Matt, first of all, obviously Indiana making the college football playoff for the first time ever, nothing short of remarkable. You consider that Kurt Cignetti's in his first year. It just makes it all the more just historic for what Indiana has been able to accomplish this year. Initial reactions to when you saw Notre Dame pop up, for me, I thought it was probably the best possible draw Indiana could have got, considering location and how these teams kind of match up stylistically.
Yeah, I thought so too, and it kind of looked like as you watch the games Saturday night when you saw what happened with when Clemson won. I think that kind of obviously did kind of played a big part because it got them in. Because I don't think the ACC gets a second team in if Clemson doesn't win that game, and then obviously with SMU losing, I think they kind of basically flip flop spots or almost kind of flip flop spots with Indiana. So yeah, I'm with you. It was selfishly, it was the one I was rooting for, mainly because it's only a couple hours for us. As opposed to going to like Penn State where it's 8 hours and you're driving up in the mountains in late December, or if you had to fly somewhere. But I'm with you. I think it's not going to be an easy game. Notre Dame's a good team. They can really run the ball. We'll talk about it more later, and they got a good defense. But I do think kind of their strengths kind of match up with Indiana's strengths. So it should be a good contest. I think they're 7, 8 point favorite. I could be wrong on that. I think it's right around there. Um, but I think it should be a pretty good matchup. And hopefully, like you said, I haven't really looked at the ticket prices. I kind of heard about them, but it sounds like $1,500 is the cheapest one, which is crazy. So hopefully the Indiana fans get their allotment. It's probably not going to be a ton. I would guess 3 or 4 thousand maybe. And then maybe some of them who've got some money to burn can find a way to get in the stadium and cheer on the Hoosiers.
Yeah, this will be this. I mean, it's been since 1991 since the last time Indiana's played Notre Dame. I think they've only played 35 times in the history of both programs, which is not a lot considering they live, they're right up the road from each other. So, and then obviously, I think people kind of forget that Indiana actually did schedule Notre Dame. I think for it might have been 2030, 2031. It's a home and home, I think it is with Notre
Yeah.
Dame. So this could be a little bit of a preview for that, but obviously a lot's going to change from here until then. But stylistically, Matt, Notre Dame, they basically have hung their hat on their rushing attack all season with Jeremiah Love. And then obviously Riley Leonard, their quarterback, is just a really good scrambler, which we've seen give Indiana's defense some trouble this year with mobile quarterbacks. How much have you started looking into Notre Dame yet, digging into them yet? Personally, I have not. I'm going to probably start looking into them a little bit more as next week comes, game week comes. But how much have you been able to watch Notre Dame so far this year?
I mean, not a ton like you. I mean, honestly, the last game where I really got a chance to watch them for any length of time was week 2 when they lost to Northern Illinois. I mean, most weeks obviously we're in the press box, and I've seen bits and pieces. I know Riley Leonard can really run. They use him a ton in the run game. And then you mentioned Love, the running back, who's really good. I think he has been banged up, but I'm assuming he's going to play. Um, and they're going to have a good offensive line. They're going to have a good defensive line. Notre Dame almost always has that. I know Leonard can struggle, so I mean, if you can slow him down in the run game and force him to throw the ball, I think you can get him into some mistakes. But obviously, that's easier said than done. And then, defensively, this will be a game. It's good to me. It's going to come down. Can you protect Curtis Short? Because if you can, I think you can. You can. He'll find guys and they can move the ball. But that's a big key: is can that O line for Indiana hold up against Notre Dame's defensive front?
It'll be that would be. I honestly think just the 10,000 you that'll probably be what ends up deciding the matchup is that run D for Indiana, the number one ranked run D in the nation versus Notre Dame's rushing attack. Obviously, we'll have to dive into the numbers a little bit more. Notre Dame did go into USC in the rivalry week, and they didn't put on a great showing there. The defense definitely looked a lot more susceptible. Now they did have injuries there. Notre Dame did, which probably didn't help things. But that's probably something that Indiana's going to look back on, especially that film, and see, what did USC do to kind of expose Notre Dame. Now, I did actually go over to the Notre Dame 247 board, Matt. I do that usually most weeks just to see kind of what their perception is of Indiana, and how they view the Hoosiers this season. I'm not too surprised, but it seems like a lot of Notre Dame fans are kind of discrediting Indiana for a lot of what they've done this season. I've seen a lot of, I saw some posts that were like, Louisville is more talented than Indiana. This team is more talented than Indiana. Well, those teams didn't make the college football playoff. And, listen, I'm not going to say that Notre Dame, getting upset by NIU is anything close to Indiana or whatnot. But I mean, that's exactly the reason teams get upset is because they overlook these opponents, especially teams that they think are inferior. So I thought it was just kind of interesting that, you get a Notre Dame team that, has arguably the worst Power Four loss of the season. And a lot of their fans are going into this game thinking that Indiana is just another one of, those inferior opponents that they should take care of pretty easily. But I do understand it from their perspective too a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, it's Indiana football, and I mean, even though they've had this season, I think there's still a kind of a thought from a lot of people that it's a bit of a fluke, and it's a product of their schedule. Although, I would argue that listen, I don't think the ACC is all that strong of a conference. I think there's a few teams in the Big Ten that either didn't make a bowl game or just barely made it, who would probably have a few more wins if they play in the ACC. I mean, they got a second team in because they won that championship. Otherwise, they were going to be a one bid. I mean, they got as many as the Mountain West would have gotten or did get if Clemson doesn't win that game. So, but I get it. I mean, Notre Dame's good. They're on a roll. They won 10 in a row. This is not an impossible task for Indiana. It's going to be they're going to have to play one of their better games. They're going to have to play really well. But they're going to have to play really well no matter who they play. Like I said, I do think, like we said, I think the matchup is as good as it gets for Indiana. When you look at some of the other teams they could have faced, it's still going to be a very hard matchup. But there's no reason why they can't go up there and give them a heck of a fight. The one kind of caveat is the weather. It's probably going to be cold, but hopefully there's no moisture or precipitation. You can still run a passing offense in cold weather, but obviously it becomes more difficult if you got snow or rain or anything like that and the field's not great. That kind of weather probably obviously favors them as the better or as a team that leans on the running game. But right now, I just looking at the forecast, it's still a little ways off. I see 37 with a low of 12, which is cold, very cold, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be precipitation. So hopefully that's the case. If so, that gives Indiana, that hopefully they can run their offense and see what they can do against that defense.
Yeah. The thing with the ticket prices too is, you said it was around 1,500. I think it's still around $1,500, but Notre Dame has yet to do their lottery yet, and I know they have the season ticket holders and whatever VIP boosters, whatever they've gotten their tickets, but for the large majority of tickets, they haven't even sent those out yet to their fans. And I know a lot of people are scrambling the day of the selection show trying to get tickets, like, oh, they're this much money. There's no way we're gonna be able to get. Once Notre Dame puts out, their full allotment of tickets, I think a lot of those prices are going to go down, especially going into next week. And listen, I'll be honest, in that instant reaction piece I wrote the day of the selection show, I was definitely overreaching when I said it could be a 50-50 split. But I'm not going to apologize for that because I think Indiana is going to travel very, very well for this game. A lot of people have never, even sniffed, come close to going to a college football playoff game if you're Indiana. You might never get to go back. A lot of people I've talked to, some of my friends said, they're willing to pay a lot of money for tickets, and especially Notre Dame. I saw that one tweet where it's like, you probably won't see any Indiana red in the crowd. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Now, 50-50 split, I was probably overreaching there, but I think it's going to be a lot more cream and crimson in that crowd than you think. And there's a lot of Hoosier fans that have been waiting their entire life for an opportunity like this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know, and I think somebody said that the number they give out, and when I say they, I mean home teams in the play is 3,500. I don't know if that's right or not, but I think let's just say it's 3,500. I think there will be more than that. Indiana fans, I don't know how many more, but I'm with you. I think there'll be a good showing from IU fans, especially for those ones who are like you said are willing to pony up the prices for a ticket. So I don't think it's going to be like you'll see like one small little section of Indiana fans. I think there'll be a decent amount of IU fans, and hopefully they'll be able to make some noise and have something to cheer about.
Yeah. So it'll be, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the crowd turnout is obviously in South Bend, but I mean the location coupled with, Indiana, obviously the footprint in just the area alone with the Chicagoland area. You got fans in Ohio, obviously the Indianapolis, Bloomington area. I think it's going to be a much stronger turnout for IU than people think. And, obviously the counter argument is, Notre Dame too has been waiting a long time to get back and compete for a national title, and they're this is obviously the first year of a host site for the CFP, so doesn't come around very often. So Notre Dame fans probably won't be too eager to get rid of their tickets, but then again, there's going to be a lot of tickets on sale. I think Indiana fans will show up, and we'll ultimately see how that plays out for both teams. I did want to take a look here, Matt, at the full bracket because I thought it was kind of interesting. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I thought Indiana got a pretty good draw, all things considered. You don't, you miss the side of the bracket that's the top side of the bracket is really a buzzsaw with Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Tennessee. You miss all of those teams, and if Indiana were to make a run, to somehow get past Notre Dame and Georgia, I mean, you're looking at either Boise State, SMU, and Penn State. I don't think either any of those three teams are, as maybe daunting of a task as an Ohio State, as a Oregon, as a Texas would be.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you are able to move on, it's going to be Georgia. Obviously, it's come out. It looks like Beck is, it's looking very doubtful that he'll be able to play. I don't know after the quarterfinal, but I was actually watching that game, and that's one of those hits where you automatically think, oh, geez, shoulder. I guess it's his elbow, but it looked like it could be a shoulder, or you maybe you break a hand or a wrist or something like that. It was a bad looking hit for a quarterback. Now the guy that came in, and I cannot remember his name. He's a young player. He played well. He played well for Georgia. Gave him a little bit more of a running threat. He made some plays. Now he missed some throws. He didn't play great, but I should say he played good enough, to get them, to help them win that game. That was a tight game. It certainly helped that Quinn Ewers, in my opinion, looked absolutely terrible. I couldn't believe at some point you didn't go to Manning in that game, because Ewers was just not good. He looked like he was playing in a two-hand touch game on a Sunday afternoon, just the way he was throwing the ball. I thought there was no urgency. But anyways, I think it's a pretty good draw. I mean, Penn State draw is pretty good. I mean, they're talking about that. Like Oregon's got to get the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and Penn State gets SMU. And SMU's a good. Don't get me wrong, they're a good team, but they're coming from probably the weakest conference in this. And then they get Boise State, the G5 team. In the court, assuming they win, Penn State wins. I mean, I don't want to say it's a cakewalk to the semifinals, but they've definitely got the easiest path, in my opinion. And then we'll see how the other teams. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, I think Indiana's road is not bad. I'd rather go through Notre Dame and Georgia than have to go to Ohio State and then play Oregon out there, in the Rose Bowl. And at some point you may have to beat one of those teams if you want to try to go all the way. But that's a gauntlet. I mean, that's going to be tough. Whoever comes out Tennessee Ohio State game, that's going to be a heck of a matchup against Oregon, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously, going into the selection show, there's a lot of projections. Indiana versus Ohio State. That would have been a terrible matchup for Indiana based on what we saw in the horseshoe a couple weeks ago. So you missed them, which is good. Tennessee, there were some projections of that. Indiana having to go into Neyland. That's obviously not an easy place to play. And like you mentioned with Georgia, they're pretty banged up right now, especially at the most important position. So that could really play into IU's favor. Now they have to get past Notre Dame, obviously, but I mean, if you're looking at the rest of this bracket, if you're Penn State as the sixth seed, I don't think there's a better position you can be in right now. Maybe Texas is the five seed playing Clemson and Arizona, but I think Clemson is probably more threatening of a team just based on their athletes and stuff than
Yeah.
SMU is. So for Penn State to get to the semifinal, they just have to beat SMU at home and Boise State. And I mean, for a team that lost the Big Ten championship, that was even lucky to be in the Big Ten championship game, I mean, they probably have to come out of this feeling really, really good for themselves.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say about these matchups, and this applies to Indiana. Listen, Marcus Freeman's done a terrific job at Notre Dame, but he's a young coach, and this is he's not been in a game like this as a head coach. Now I get that Kurt Signetti hasn't either, as far as the college football playoff, but he's been in tournament games. He's coached with Saban, and they won. I think he was down there. They won their first national title when he was still on that staff, where they played for one. I mean, I do think. I mean, you look at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham's done a great job, but he's a young coach. SMU is at what's his name? Is it Lashley at SMU? I think that's the head coach. Great, done a great job, but he's another young coach. And you've got veteran coaches now. James Franklin now is like 1-14 in basically big time games in his time at Penn State. Like he just doesn't win them. So at some point, but I mean, you look at the Boise State's got another fairly young coach. I do think that will matter. Guys like Kirby Smart, guys who've been around, Sarkisian, these guys who've been around a little bit. I do think that will be an advantage. I mean, the better team's going to win, but I do think that could. I'm not saying Indiana's going to win because they have Kurt Signetti and Notre Dame. I'm just saying I like the thing since he's such a veteran coach. This is nothing's going to be too big for Signetti and what they're going to go through. And I'm not saying it will be for Notre Dame, but this is Freeman's never been in this position either. And listen, they're all the pressure's on them. They're Notre Dame. They're supposed to beat us, beat Indiana. And Indiana, I keep saying they're playing the house money. I mean, I'm not. If they lose, they lose. But they weren't even supposed to be here. Every win past 5 or 6 was gravy for them. So, in my opinion, they should be the looser team. Go up there, play your game, and see what happens.
Yeah. So this bracket, there's probably going to be some upsets here along the way, but the home site venues will obviously impact things. A team like SMU going to Penn State, Happy Valley, I'm going to be really interested to see how that team handles playing in sub 30-degree temperatures.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's the great part, I guess, too, about these home venues as well, with how it's all shaped out. But this brings me to a broader thing, Matt, which I wrote this in my instant reaction. I've talked about this a lot over the weeks of the CFP reveals. The seating system has to go. I don't know. I don't know if they're able to change it next year immediately, but the seating system has to go. The fact that Boise State and Arizona State are getting buys to me is just ridiculous. And it's not even because Boise State's a mid-major, they don't deserve a buy. They didn't earn a buy this year just based on their body of work. And for those two teams to automatically be in the quarterfinals is, to me, just I just don't agree with it at all. And the conference champion, you have to incentivize conference champions. So I understand they get automatic bids into the playoff, but this idea that you have to have 4 conference champions as your top 4 seeds, to me, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and you kind of I wonder if this is one of the things. I mean, they did it this year. You wonder if that's one of the things they're going to change. Like I said, I mean, if the Big Ten champion in basketball goes 13-7 and goes like 21-10, whatever it may be, they shouldn't just same thing the ACC or the SEC. They shouldn't get a number 1 seed in the NCAA basket. And I get it. There's more teams, but the bottom line is they shouldn't just automatically get placed in one of those top 4 seeds. Just because they won their conference championship. I mean, it's I totally agree with you. It's my biggest complaint about this is that these teams jump ahead of just seed them the way they're ranked. The way you rank them, seed them that way. And I think if that would have happened, somebody did it. I saw it on Twitter. I don't know if I can find it, but I think Indiana would have hosted. I want to say SMU. I think they would have been the 8-9 game. I could be wrong on that, but I think they would have been, or maybe it was Boise State. It would have been one of those teams. They would have been at home. And they would have been the 8-9 game, which would have been awesome. Awesome for the IU fans and awesome for the program and for the school. But yeah, I'm with you. And it's not just because Indiana's not getting to go to it. There's a lot of teams. I mean, you're looking at this bracket, and I mean, Tennessee, in my opinion, I mean, you got Boise State. And listen, Arizona State's had a great season, but there's no way Arizona State and Boise State should get a bye. There's no way. I'm sorry. There's nothing against them. And I would say the same thing. Honestly, I would probably say the same thing if Indiana had a bye. even though we cover Indiana, I think they've had a great season. I don't think I can sit here and say that Indiana is going into this one of the top four teams in the country. I think they deserve to be in, and I think they could get on a run and make some noise. But I don't think you could say they're one of the top four teams in the country. I think there's four other teams that would be more deserving of that first round bye than they would be. So yeah, I don't like it. I hope they change it next year and they seed them how they rank them. I think that's the most. Nothing's going to be fair because no two schedules are equal. So, but the bottom line is, you if you rank them this way, then seed them that way. Don't change it because a team, you know, because a team won a conference championship. If the conference championships aren't supposed to matter that much if the team loses, why does it matter that much if they win? You know what I'm saying? Like I guess I don't understand why you get, if it's going to matter that much if they win, then if they lose or and obviously for SMU it did. For Texas, it really didn't. I mean, obviously they dropped a little bit, but they're still fifth. I mean, they're right there. So yeah, I would just see them how they rank them. That's my solution. I don't know if it's the right one, but that's what I would do.
And the other part of this too is I don't have a problem with the CFP field expanding to 12 teams. So obviously, going to 12 is what allowed a team like Indiana, like an SMU, like a Boise State to get in when, they otherwise probably wouldn't have ever had a chance to get into the playoff. But especially in a year like this year, and I'm sure it's going to change. There's ebbs and flows in college football all the time. But this is an incredibly mediocre year for college football in terms of just elite teams compared to the rest of the pack. I mean, aside from Oregon, yeah, who on this 12 team field has played like an elite team this year? I don't think anybody has. And that's another issue is, there's maybe four, five, six teams you could say that are deserving of a CFP spot, like a legitimate CFP spot, and the rest are kind of just there because they have to fill out the rest of the field and they're, the best of the rest. And, people are already talking about they need to expand to 16 teams, 20 teams. I don't think they do because then you water down the entire process. And I get that, the FCS does it, the D2, D3, they all do, bracket style, tournament style national championships. But if the goal is to, to give the most deserving teams these CFP spots, I don't know how expanding a field would help that, first of all. And, second of all, I just like a year like this, I just, I don't think there's more than five teams that deserve to be in this field.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you expand it, I mean, look at the NCAA tournament. Every year, there's three or four teams that get jobbed. I mean, they do. It happens. So you can expand it to as many teams as you want. Unless I mean, I guess if you included every single team in call, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm just saying there's going to be a problem. There's always going to be somebody who feels slighted. And people who are pissing and moaning about the process. I mean, I don't know if 12 is the ideal number. I think it's pretty good. Um, you know, and I'm with you. I mean, Oregon's been, in my opinion, they've kind of separated themselves. They've had some close games, but I mean, they've kind of separated themselves as the best team in the country. Now we'll see how it plays out. This is why you play the tournament, um, and see how that plays out. But I do think there are any number of these teams, and because of the parity in this thing, that's why I think an Indiana, a Clemson, an SMU, one of these teams, Tennessee, who's at 9, one of these teams could go all the way through. I mean, I do think, I don't, like you said, there's not a bunch of dominant teams like there's been those years when you had Saban at Bama and Dabo Swinney had those really good teams at Clemson, or even the last couple of years with Kirby Smart or some of those Ohio State teams where you had like 3 or 4 who were clearly better than everybody else. I don't think that's the case. I think you got maybe one team that's kind of separated themselves, and then you got maybe 3 or 4 teams that you could put in a hat, and then another 4 or 5, 6 teams, and that's kind of what we have with these 12 teams. So we'll see how it plays out. It should be. I'm really interested because it's and expanding the teams. You're just lengthening. I mean, you're lengthening the season. I mean, at the end of the day, these are I know they're getting paid, but these are still college kids. I mean, they're 19, 20 years old. I mean, are we going to get to like where it's almost, I mean, they're almost playing. If you win, was that one? If you won, 2, 3, you have to win 4 games if you come from the first round. If you played in a conference championship, that's 17. That's an NFL season. That's an NFL season for guys who are not NFL guys. They're not grown men, 25, 28, 30 years old. So to me, I would not expand it any more than what it is. I think it's at a good number, but we'll see how it plays out. I think it's going to be great drama.
Mhm. What's your stance on conference championship games, especially the losers in this case? affecting teams? Because that was one of the big topics that Ward Manuel, the CFP chairman, talked about was, we're not going to overly penalize teams that lose in their conference championship because obviously it's a feat in its own to make the conference title game. But we saw it play out this week where there were teams that did get penalized for losing their conference championship game, and in other seasons that could really be the difference between what keeps you in the field, what keeps you out of the field. Now, fortunately, this year Penn State played close to Oregon, SMU played close in their conference title game. So, what's your stance on that in terms of how much it should affect playing that 13th game should affect those losers?
It's tough. I mean, yeah, I don't think they're going to get rid of conference championships. But part of me wonders, what purpose do they serve now with the way they're doing things? Here's the other thing: if you're in the Big Ten, um, you're going to have half the conference is going to have one more loss than the SEC and the ACC because you play an extra conference game. So you could have a team that's got two losses in the Big Ten who's had a pretty good season. Let's say Ohio State made it to the conference championship with two. Let's say they got their two losses and they get beat by Oregon. They're a three-loss team. I don't know that third loss should be they should be penalized for that. It's just hard to say because, like I said, these conferences aren't the same. It's just not. It's not the same. I mean, um, you know, if Boise State would have lost to UNLV, listen, UNLV's had a nice season, and Barry Odom, who's the new Purdue coach, did a good job there. But I mean, like they would have been in the playoff. I think they would have been. I shouldn't say that for sure, but I think they would have been in the playoff if they would have beat Boise State. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure how to weight these conference championship games. And the Big Ten just does they got rid of divisions, so you just do the top two. SEC still does divisions, so you have the top. So I don't know. I mean, if you did divisions, would it be the same teams? Probably not. It's really hard. That's where it's really complicated for me. I don't know what the solution is. I really don't. And with these huge mega conferences, that's why I think at some point, and this is down the road, at some point, 30 teams are going to break away. 30 to 40 teams are going to break away. And then you're going to have a thing where you can't play everybody every year, but you're going to have Big Ten and SEC teams, basically that's what they're going to be playing each other. I think that's what's going to happen. And maybe that'll alleviate some of these issues, but that's probably down the road. But right now, I don't know what to do with the conference championship games. I think if you go get smoked, maybe that should have an impact because it looked like Penn State was going to get blown out, and then they came back and played well. They made that a heck of a game. Maybe that should be, but then again, if you win, how much should it help you? I don't know. It's really hard. I don't envy those committee guys because no matter what they do, they're wrong. I mean, somebody's going to be pissed off at them.
Yeah. And another component of the title games, the conference title games, is the injury risk, obviously, and we saw it with Georgia. And, to me, just watching the conference, I actually went to the Big Ten title game at Lucas Oil just because the tickets were like $20. I was like, might as well just go and, just for the fun of it. But just watching these games and being there, it didn't feel like as grand of a thing as it used to, the conference title games. And I think a lot of that is because, there's still a lot to play for with the CFP and a lot of these teams jockeying for position to get into the CFP and their seeding and stuff. Like it doesn't feel like the Big Ten, the conference title games are as important as they used to be. And then you get the situation with Georgia where, is it worth it to, I'm not gonna say it's not worth it to play these games because obviously you want to play in the conference title game, you want to compete for conference championships. But if you lose your starting quarterback, and it could have been any of these teams playing their conference title game, you could have lost a key player. Uh, is it almost worth it to, be in these games and, when the reward is just, oh, we get to play four more games after this. And that's kind of the one thing that I'm kind of grappling over too is how do you make the conference title games feel as important as, getting into the CFP and everything after that?
Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, not to be Joey Galloway, but if you're Georgia, I mean, even if you lose, you're going to be in it. Then you're not going to get a first round bye. But is that first round bye worth losing Jason Beck, who's a lot of people think could be an NFL guy? And I know he hasn't had the season everybody thought he was, but I mean, he's a guy that's on that. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, you got the first round bye, but now you got to go without possibly your starting quarterback for the rest of the way, a guy that has been instrumental in what you've done. So I don't know. I mean, and then you kind of wonder. I don't know that you'll have opt outs. I mean, I guess it's possible. But if a guy sees what happens to Beck, and let's just say his elbow's messed up and he's got to have I don't know if it's how they do it, but if he's got to have like what they have in baseball with the Tommy John surgery or something, and he's out for 12 months, that's going to obviously that's going to he's going to take a hit draft wise, financially, and all that. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, I'm guessing, was it cool to be there?
Yeah, no, it was cool. It was definitely it was weird because, obviously Oregon and Penn State are far to travel from to Indy. And there were definitely a lot of fans there, but a lot of people just from random Big Ten schools were there. Like I was there with a friend. I was sitting next to these two people. We didn't go with them. They're just happened to be sitting there. This one guy from Wisconsin was just incredibly drunk, but he's like he's trying to talk to me about Luke Fickle and all this stuff. I'm like, dude, I really don't care. But yeah, there was a lot of fans from different Big Ten schools there, and it kind and that's the other thing too with conference expansion. This is a different conversation for another day, but it's weird with conference expansion and all these teams coming from all over. It doesn't feel especially with Oregon there. It didn't really have the Big Ten game feel, as it would have, if you have, another Midwest school there. So
Yeah.
it was kind of weird, but it was fun. All right. Anything else on the CFP here, Matt? I know we'll see the road ahead. Do you have any thoughts on that Friday night game, Indiana getting that standalone game? I kind of like it because first of all, it puts Indiana as, the only game to watch that night on a Friday night. You obviously have the history of the in-state battle there. Um, the 8 o'clock kick is going to be a late night, especially for us doing post game stuff. But that's our own problems that you guys probably don't care about. But any thoughts on Indiana getting that standalone spot?
I personally liked it because I mean, any of the other, if we went on Saturday, it would have been, and I know people, like you said, people don't care, but selfishly, I get my Saturday and I'm gonna be tired, but I'll get my Saturday free. And my wife will be happy because we're supposed to go to her family for Christmas that day. And I told her before, I'm not sure I'll be able to make it, but now I will. So, but yeah, I think it's cool that Indiana's the one game. Indiana Notre Dame will be the only game on that day, and it's obviously 8 o'clock prime time and all that. So yeah, I think it's and Indiana's done this before. They've played a Friday night game. Not that that's a huge deal. I'm sure Notre Dame will be fine adjusting, but it is something that they've gone through before, so they have a routine, a schedule that they can kind of lean on. But yeah, selfishly and for the attention on Indiana, I like the Friday night game.
Yeah. Yeah, so that one should be really fun too. And just the fact that we're even getting to go to, cover a CFP game, that Indiana fans are getting to go to a CFP game is just for everyone involved, it's so great to see. I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but IU actually moved back the winter commencement to earlier in the day on Friday so people could go watch that game later in the day, or I guess go to the game if they want to. And I saw a tweet. Justice Ellison's mom had commented on it. She's like, my son's supposed to be in that commencement, and he's not even going to be there because he's playing in the game. So, a lot of things moving around for IU that you just would never expect to happen. The one last thing, Matt, I did want to touch on with this game, and we'll talk about it more next week when we do our fuller preview. The crowd noise. This is something that Chris Kennedy has talked about a lot coming out of the Ohio State game. That he said that IU has learned a lot of lessons coming out of that game, how to handle road environments like that. And last night, actually going to the basketball game into Assembly Hall, the football team was practicing over in Memorial Stadium. You could hear them pumping in crowd noise as they were practicing. Now that's obviously a lot different than being actually in the road environment. Um, I don't know how do you, based on what they did against Ohio State with the silent count and with Bray Lynch sort of tapping or pointing to Mike Kadick to signal when to snap the ball. I don't, how do you make that process more efficient and to the point where it's not like Ohio State where teams are just teeing off? Like that's the one thing that I'm still curious about, where Kirsten Gray said we've learned lessons from that, but if you're gonna do a silent count, how do you make that process more efficient?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, because teams have been doing that for years. It's not a new thing.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
seen teams doing this for years where, you'll have the guard, one of them look back, and then the quarterback will, either, say something or clap his hands, and he'll look for and then slap the leg of the center to let him know to snap the ball. So I'm not sure what other things you can do. And I'm not saying Notre Dame won't be loud. I'm wondering if it will be as loud as Ohio State. I mean, it doesn't hold as many people. It still holds a lot. but honestly, I've never been to a game of Notre Dame, so I don't know exactly. I mean, I've been like Michigan holds 100 and some thousand, but Michigan never seems super loud to me, and maybe it's kind of the way it's built. Maybe it doesn't hold the sound in as much. I don't know. I could be totally just saying nonsense here, but that's what I'll be interested in. I wonder if it will be as loud, but I'm sure they're going to have to deal with crowd noise. I don't know what else you can do other than what they've been doing. Now, maybe you can have both guys look back and and I don't know. Maybe I think at some point you'd figure that out, but maybe you'd have one of them. They don't know which guys letting them know that they're getting ready to snap. I don't know. I'm not really sure what else you can do. And maybe you can even try to see if you draw him off sides, like you have him slap his leg and he claps it. Maybe you get Notre Dame to jump because I think the snap's coming. I don't know. But that stuff's been around forever. I just don't know how you change it up. Maybe the one thing you can do is maybe snap quicker. Maybe not take as long. Now that takes away some of your ability to shift and to put guys in motion because obviously you can't snap like a. But maybe sometimes you can try to snap the ball quicker. I think the biggest thing, I know this is going to sound pretty simplistic, you just block better. If you move the ball and you get and you can play a little bit faster, then that they're not going to be able to tee off like Ohio State was able to against Indiana. Now I know it's easier said than done, but just do a better job up front, do a better job of communication. I mean, even if they know when the snap is coming, if you do your job, you should be able to block them. I mean, you still have time to get there and block guys, and they're going to have good players, but you still should be able to block them. So that's at the end of the day, you just got to execute better. That's the only thing I could say. You got to execute better and do a better job than you did over in Columbus.
Yeah, and that Notre Dame front seven shouldn't be as physically overpowering as Ohio State's was, so that might play into it a little bit too and help IU in that case. So, but we'll see ultimately what the crowd noise is like and if they'll even have to go to a silent count. Because for IU's sake, hopefully they can just operate normally on offense with the claps and stuff and not have to deal with the silent count. But that'll ultimately play itself out. All right, next order of business, Matt. Tino Sunseri. The day after we recorded last week, it was announced that he was taking the UCLA offensive coordinator position. This will be his first time calling plays as a full-time play caller at anywhere, honestly, but especially at a P5, P4 school. First of all, good for him. He's earned it. He's one of the top young rising stars in coaching in college football. So good for him. What I will say is, I know a lot of fans were kind of concerned over losing Tino Sunseri, but first of all, he did not call plays at Indiana. This was not his offense he was running at Indiana. And, for as good as Curtis Rourke was this year, Curtis Rourke was a really good player before he came to Indiana. I'm not trying to discredit Tino Sunseri because, obviously his track record is phenomenal. He got Indiana in the door, Julian Lewis, and, his development speaks for itself. He's able to get Tyler Cherry on board. But, all the things I just said, Curtis Rourke was a phenomenal quarterback even before he came to Indiana. So for all these fans that I think are, maybe concerned with Tino Sunseri leaving, I would pump the brakes a little bit because yeah, he was important, but I have faith in Kurt Cignetti to go out and find somebody who is equally as good as Tino Sunseri was.
Yeah, and Coach Sunseri is a fantastic coach, and I think he's going to do a good job at UCLA. I mean, it's obviously a tough place to walk into, but they do have some players, assuming they can keep their guys and add some more. But you're right. I mean, Kurt Cignetti's and the other thing, Kurt Cignetti is known in college football as somewhat of a quarterback whisperer. So if there's anybody who knows who to target, what to look for, and a quarterback coach, it's going to be him because he played the position, he's coached the position, and he knows what he needs at that spot. I put out a hot board. That's just me. It's the same thing I did last year when I did the head coaching hot board. It's names that if I was the athletic director, I would look at, and these are names that if I was the head coach in Indiana, these are kind of guys I would kind of look at. I don't know if any of those guys are going to be the hire. It may come from somebody else. I actually had over 20 names and I pared it down to 12 because I just thought it was too many. But I did pare it down to 12. I knocked off probably like 9 or 10 guys. But yeah, he'll find a good guy. What I'm curious about, obviously, Sunseri's staying through. So to me, that's kind of interesting because like I'm assuming when they meet as a staff for recruiting, he's not coming into those meetings. Because obviously he's a competitor now. And the other thing I'm wondering about, my guess is Cignetti is going to probably wait till after the season, but it's going to make recruiting a portal quarterback interesting. Now, like I said, Cignetti has a reputation as a quarterback guy. Mike Shanahan in this offense they built with Cignetti, obviously Cignetti, a big part of it, is very quarterback friendly. So I still think you can get a guy, but I wonder if some guys may want to know, hey, who am I going to be working with on a day to day basis? Um, and could you bring? I mean, you could probably hire a guy now. He couldn't be on the staff, right? Like you could say we're going to hire him on whatever day, the day after you lose, or the day after the national championship if you make it that far, and he could be kind of around the program, and he could be there for recruiting. I don't know how that works. I'm honestly not sure. Excuse me. You couldn't have him as an 11th assistant right now, but they'll get a good coach. And the other thing about Sunseri leaving, I went and looked up the salaries from last year. He was making, I think, 540 as a quarterback coach. There was like a 23%. So let's say 20% increase in assistant pay. It's a little bit more than that, which would be for 540. What is that? About $110,000. So let's just assume he would have got that kind of raise. He'd been about 650. My guess at UCLA, and I haven't seen the numbers, I'd be surprised if he's not getting seven figures. And if he's not, I bet you he's really, really, really close. And it's not just about calling plays. I mean, and the other thing, I did not know this, Deshaun Foster was with the Panthers when Sunseri's father was a D-line coach there a number of years ago. So Foster's known Tino Sunseri since he was basically a kid. Like it's a personal relationship, because people are like, well, why would you go to a UCLA team that has been struggling? Well, I think that's probably part of it. And to be a play caller. I don't know that he would have taken a job with another team that was coming off, what are they, 4-8, 5-7 this year? But the fact that he knows the head coach, obviously UCLA's got some tradition. That's a great area for recruiting. So, and I think Deshaun Foster being a former UCLA guy, and I know they've had some financial issues. That's one of the reasons why they were so anxious to get in the Big Ten. I think he gets 3 more years. I think he gets 4 years before they make a move, unless they just bottom out. Now, if they go 1-11, 1-11, he's probably in big trouble. But I don't think they'll bottom out. I think he's going to get 3 years. And, listen, coaches are confident guys. I guarantee you, Sunseri's like, I'm going to go in there and we're going to be great on offense. That's how they think. And I won't be surprised if they are. What's interesting is UCLA, I believe, comes Indiana next year. That's one of the games for Indiana at home. So it'll be kind of cool to see how they do offensively and all that kind of stuff. And, but good for him. And like I said, I am not at all concerned about who the hire is going to be. I don't know who it'll be. I don't know when it'll be, but I have no doubt that Kurt Cignetti will hire a good coach. All he's done in his career is have great people around him. What I'm interested in is, does he go for another younger guy, maybe a guy that's a little bit older? My guess is younger, like the guys he's been going after. I would think it'll be somebody who's had quarterback and or maybe play calling experience at some level, but it'll be really fascinating to see who they bring in.
Yeah. And, I had that same thought too about, what kind of coach would he go after? Somebody that's already been proven or a younger guy that's cutting their teeth. And I tend to agree that I think he's going to go younger because that's what he's generally done in the past. And I think some of that too, and this is just me kind of opining here, is, since Cignetti obviously didn't get his first shot at head coaching job until he was 50. And I think part of that, he wants to give these younger guys a chance to really cut their teeth earlier in their career and not have to wait as long as he had to. So that's just my opinion. I think he's going to, tend to lean to somebody that, is maybe looking for their first, big opportunity at the P4 level. But we'll see. And then the timing too that you mentioned, Matt, I thought it was interesting because UCLA, I was over on their board and their UCLA football writer, he had said that UCLA was telling recruits going, even before signing day that Sunseri was going to be their next OC. That's what UCLA was telling their recruits. So I wonder if Indiana might be doing something similar, with transfer quarterbacks in that they know who their guy's going to be. They're not going to announce it, but they're going to tell, the transfers, this is who our guy's going to be. I wonder if it's going to work out similar to that where, they're probably not going to announce it until after Indiana CFP run is over, but they probably have an idea right now of who it will be.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. And then they have in that guy. Maybe you have that guy. I don't know what the rules are. If he can speak to him, I guess he can. I'm not really sure how that works. But yeah, and I after it came out, because the signing day was last Wednesday. Was it that day or the next day where it came out that about? Obviously, I mean, Cignetti didn't talk about it, but he knew. And after I left, I'm like, yeah, he knew. There was no doubt. And the way he spoke about it, was it yesterday? I'm trying to think what day we had the press conference. I got my days. Yeah, or on Sunday. I'm sorry, Sunday, 2 days ago. He's happy for him. This isn't one of those kind of uncomfortable. It's, he came in and he understands. I mean, it's Signetti was in the same position a number of years ago, and these guys are ambitious. He understands it. This is what he wants. He gets his chance to call plays. So yeah, it will be interesting. The one older guy that I put on my hot board was Robert Weiner. Well, Shane Montgomery too, and I put him on there because Shane Montgomery was actually Signetti's first quarterback in OC when he took the James Madison job, and then he left to go to Buffalo because Buffalo, even though it's a MAC school, was still a little bit above an FCS program. And then Shanahan got the OC job, and he brought in Sunseri as a GA. But so he's a little bit older. He's been around for like 30 years, and there is a connection loosely to Indiana. He replaced Terry Hepner when Hepner became the IU coach at Miami, Ohio, when Hepner came to IU. But Robert Weiner is a guy, he coached some guys who played in Indiana, Micah McFadden, Wap, who's the other guy? Jawan, he's a DB. I can't think of his last name. But he coached some guys that play Tom Allen's son. But Weiner is a longtime coach in Tampa. He's gone to Toledo, and he has been lauded for his ability to develop quarterbacks at Toledo. And he was ranked, even though he's a little bit older guy, he was ranked one of the top recruiters in the MAC conference. So I don't think he'll get the job. I have a ton of respect for Coach Weiner. I haven't talked to him in a long time because he's at Toledo now, but would communicate with him when he was at Plant. Now he was recruiting all those guys. He's a really good coach. I think it'll be somebody in that kind of 35 to 40-year-old range. That's my guess. I'm just throwing that out there. Because I think that's kind of what I think he likes. I don't know what he wants. Good coaches. I wonder part of it's for recruiting. Young guys can kind of, even if you're not an experienced recruiter, I think as a young guy, you can just recruiting will come naturally. But like I said, it'll be interesting. And you might be right. They could have the guy already, and we'll find out, once the season's over and he's been in place for, whatever, 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Yeah. And the other component too with the news of the Sunseri when that got reported last week was Indiana extending the rest of their assistant coaches for another 2 years. And it almost felt like Indiana was sort of not saving face, obviously, but they wanted a good thing to come out of maybe a not so good situation with Sunseri leaving, with announcing that they had extended the rest of the assistants. You know, to keep all three of your coordinators after the seasons they've had, after Brian Haynes is a Broyle semifinalist, Mike Shanahan leads a top 5 offense in the nation. First of all, I do want to see those contracts because those two guys must be getting some massive paydays to stick around. And we'll obviously never know what kind of coaching opportunities came their way this offseason, but for Indiana to be able to keep them around, I think it says a lot about how much they enjoy working with Curt Cignetti, first of all, and just the opportunities they think that Indiana can bring them at this point. Where in the past that hasn't been the case. We saw Kalen DeBoer jump ship, the opposite moment and obviously he will left for a head coaching position, but that's different. But so could Brian Haynes could have left for a coaching position. Mike Shanahan could have left for a head coaching position. So for them to stick around, I think it speaks a lot to the sort of perception around Indiana changing, especially with coaches, and no longer seeing Indiana as just a stepping stone job. I think that's really important, and that's kind of also why I've always felt that Shanahan and Haynes were more likely to stay than some guy that didn't have any connection to the program, or Cignetti was. They've been loyal to Cignetti for a long time, and I think that probably also plays into it. And the fact that they're staying, the fact that you're going to have both your leaders of the offensive defense back next year, it's just so important for Indiana. And Tino Sunseri, for as good as he was, he didn't call plays, not his offense. And so you keep Shanahan around. It's just, you couldn't have asked really for a better offseason for Indiana so far with the
Yeah,
coaching.
and real quick, another guy that we haven't talked about, but keeping Derek Owens.
Yeah.
I don't know this for a fact. I would not be shocked if people were trying to steal him because it's obvious what he's done physically with this program, with this team. Now they brought in a lot of older guys, but this team has stayed incredibly healthy all year. You haven't had those kind of injuries that you have, and they're in tremendous shape. They have not. We've talked about it. They don't play a ton of guys, and they're still as strong in the fourth quarter as they are in the first quarter, and that's a credit to Owens and his staff. And he is, in my opinion, one of the 5-10 best strength coaches in the country. And I'm assuming he probably got a nice little bump in pay as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just so good to see. I saw yesterday Rod Ojong was named to the AFCA top 35 coaches under 35. So good for him. we'll see what happens with Bryant Haynes and the Broyles Award. I don't know how you don't give it to him. I mean, he led a top three, top two defense in the nation this year at a place where he had to completely revamp the defense, had to completely change the scheme, and didn't miss a beat from where he came from at JMU. Um, so obviously we're the IU guys, so we're gonna say Haynes deserves it. I would be shocked if he doesn't win it, but then again, there's a lot of good coaches around the nation, so that's just my opinion on that one. Anything else on coaches, Matt? Just the fact that they're able to keep the nine guys
No,
intact.
this has absolutely nothing to do with Indiana, but there's a report on Twitter that Bill Belichick's the new coach of North Carolina.
Ooh, breaking news.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy who did it. I don't know who he is. His name's Ollie Conley. I have no idea if it's true, but wow, that's that's something else. If Bill Belichick's can you imagine him recruiting your kid? Uh, I mean, but he's a great coach. But yeah, that's I don't like I said, that's nothing to do with Indiana. I just haven't seen it on Twitter while we were talking. So
Yeah, I just saw this too. It says this so the guy that reported it, Ollie Connolly.
have you? I've never heard of him. I'm not.
I've
Doesn't
never
mean he's
heard of
not.
him.
Yeah, I doesn't mean he's not legit. He's not somebody I follow on Twitter, so I don't know who he is.
His Twitter bio says he was previously an NFL and college football scout and recruiting analyst, and right now he writes for The Guardian. So I
Yeah,
guess take that for what it's worth. I was talking to somebody over the weekend, one of my friends, about the potential of Belichick going to North Carolina. Is When you're recruiting guys, is that obviously Bill Belichick and his name and everything is going to be enticing, but if he's only going to be there for a year or two, like how enticing is that for recruits? And I feel like other schools would be able to pretty easily negatively recruit against that, right?
I would think so. I mean that'll be something that it'll be interesting if they ask him. Because I mean, I think that's a legit question. I mean, what is he, 72, 73? And the thing is, supposedly they pushed Mac Brown out because of his age, or that was one of the factors.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I think it also because they had kind of really up and down season. But I mean, if it was an age thing, you just went from an old guy to another old guy. Now the one thing is, I think Belichick, I didn't watch it with McAfee, but I did read what he said. Where basically he's almost run this like an NFL team. Like it's going to be structured that way. And you see the thing with Andrew Luck at Stanford. You wonder if people talk about these where everybody like at Stanford, they all they report to Luck. They don't report to the head coach. The assistants do, which is really interesting. I can't like let's say at Indiana, I can't see that happen with Kurt Signetti. There's no way. There's no way his assistants are reporting to anybody but him. I mean, he'd be one of these guys that would have the head coach GM dual role. I mean, it's what he has anyway. But I'm just saying. But it'll be interesting going forward as especially as you get more into this pay for play, the revenue sharing, and all this stuff. If you do have somebody like an Andrew Luck or somebody like that in your program, who basically handles like the business part of stuff, maybe not so much the football part, but and obviously Belichick's got a ton of experience. It's a fascinating hire for me. It really is. I would feel a lot better if I was a North Carolina person if he was 63 instead of 73, because not that he can't coach. I mean, he seems to be in pretty good shape, and he's got a 25-year-old girlfriend to keep him young. I mean, so that'll help. But I mean, it's an interesting hire, and it's really fascinating to see how this is going to work out.
Yeah. I do wonder what the connection is between North Carolina and Belichick because that's kind of an odd pairing. Like I've never heard of them having any kind of connection, but maybe there's something there. Um, so I mean, if this report turns out to be true, that is going to be
It,
crazy over there in
the
Chapel
other
Hill.
thing is he's only 15 wins shy of Don Shula's record. I mean, I mean, if you do this, if this is your last job, not that that's what you're shooting for, but that's a big deal. Like that all-time wins in NFL history is a big deal. And 15 wins, I mean, he was going to get an NFL job most likely. If he coached, it might take him 2 years to do it because I mean, obviously 15-2 is a really good season. But I mean, it's just interesting that he's walking away from the NFL. The other thing is, I think he was making like 15, 20 million a year with the Patriots. I mean, I'm assuming he's going to get paid good money by North Carolina, but there's no way he's getting paid that. I mean, I think half of that would be a good salary. Like if it was 7.5, 8 million, that'd be a good salary. So that's the other thing. But maybe he's made so much money, it's not a big deal. I mean, we've been getting paid that much for so long. Maybe you just want this challenge.
Well, the component of that is, and these are obviously just reports. I don't know if this is true. We don't cover North Carolina, but is that his son, part of the deal is that his son's going to be the head coach in waiting. So maybe he's willing to take on less money for that.
Yeah, and I the first time I was talking to somebody, I said, I guarantee you, when this first came out, I was like, I guarantee it, because his son's the DC at Washington. They obviously how you played against. I think his name's Steve
Yeah.
Belichick. I guess I guarantee you he's the DC at North Carolina next year. Guarantee it. And I didn't even really think about the head coach waiting, but that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's the only reason I could think that he would want to be, so eager at his age to take a college job. So if that happens, good for North Carolina. That's going to get a lot of eyeballs on them. So that it's college football never disappoints with the news on the news front. Other thing, Matt, with the coaching carousel, Purdue hired Barry Odom over from UNLV. Did you have any thoughts on the hire? I actually thought it was a pretty solid hire. He obviously didn't pan out for him at Missouri, but it's tough to win in the SEC. Went to UNLV, which is a place that obviously had their own host of issues with NIL and stuff this year, and still brought them to the doorstep of the college football playoff. I thought it was a pretty good hire for Purdue, all things considered, because I thought initially they're going to go after the next Ryan Walters, the young up and coming coordinator. So to get a guy that was right there in CFP contention this year, it's hard to find much fault in that hire.
Yeah, I thought it was too. I was surprised that it was a defensive minded guy. I figured I figured they would try to get a head coach, because obviously it went so badly with Walters, who had never had any experience. I really thought it might be Tyson Helton. There was some smoke on Chuck Martin in Miami, Ohio, who's a solid coach. His record overall doesn't look great, but he took over a Miami program that was really in the gutter, and he's done a good job. He's a little bit older guy. He's like 60, but he's done a good job. He recruits Indiana. The one question I have is who's his OC going to be? Because a big part of their success out there has been that Brendan Marion and that kind of go offense that they run. It's a running based offense and it's not triple option, but kind of the way they run things is kind of similar, I guess. I haven't watched a ton of it, but I mean, I would think UNLV would offer him the job. I would, if I was UNLV, try to keep him there. And that was obviously one of the biggest reasons why Walter. There's a bunch of them, but they never got the offense going at Purdue. They went from an offensive program to a program that really struggled, and it didn't work with Harrell, and then they fired him this year. So that would be the big question for me. Now there's some, I'm not saying these guys are going to be in the mix, but there are some guys out there. A Tom Herman, I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know if he would do it. A Kevin Wilson, guys who could be an OC who would do a pretty good job. I am not anyway saying Kevin Wilson, and I don't know that he would take the job at Purdue. But if you want to get back into coaching, and let's be honest, Kevin Wilson's days as the head coach are probably over after it did not work at Tulsa. But I would think he'll still be in demand as an OC. So that's my question. Who's their OC going to be? He was okay at Missouri. That was a little bit of a tough situation because I think they had some racial stuff going on within the team or on the campus. I can't remember exactly what it was, and it was during COVID, or right around COVID. Was right in the middle of it. So I think it raises the floor. I'm not sure how much it raises the ceiling for Purdue, but I think it definitely raises the floor. I don't think you'll see a 1-11 Purdue team. I don't know that you'll see an 11-1 Purdue team, but I don't think you'll see them getting the snot kicked out of them every week like they did this year.
Yeah, yeah. The coordinator hires that they make are going to be really crucial for them, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll see what happens there. It's going to be, after the season Purdue had, it's going to take a lot of heavy lifting to get that program back to where they want to be. And obviously, I've seen a whole bunch of stuff about how, the shape their NIL is in. So they're going to have to, make a lot of commitment there. It's just, it's fascinating to see how Indiana and Purdue have essentially flip-flopped, their
Yeah.
standing in college football over the last
And
couple.
they're paying him good. I just saw on Football Scoop his contract 6 years and $39 million. So
Oh,
he's going to start out 6 point something, and towards the end, and he can earn up to 1.5 in bonuses.
mm,
They don't know what their assistant pool is, and they actually in the article they mentioned how Purdue under Walters was at 5.5, and Indiana just recently went. Now they said 11, but that 11 we found out is not just for on-field guys; it's for everybody. But I'm assuming the 5.5 Purdue is probably the same. It's probably for everybody, but I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see what their assistant pool is and who they're able to draw there. But if he can get a good OC, their roster's a mess. It's worse than what Signetti walked into last year at Indiana. I mean, it is in shambles. If they can get some of those guys to come back, then they'll be better shape. But man, he's got a ton of work to do.
Yeah. I mean, how realistically, how many guys do you want back from a 1-11 team? Because I mean,
Yeah, it's true. There are some guys I want. I want Will Help back. I want Thieneman back. There may be a few other guys, but yeah, you're probably right. And I was heard on the radio real quick that I think it was on the morning show yesterday. Somebody said they talked to somebody who covers a team in Vegas. The expectation is there's going to be at least 10 guys from UNLV that follows him to Purdue. So it's going to be kind of like a Signetti situation. And obviously UNLV, those 10 guys, if they're kind of like the JMU guys, that's really going to help them. Now you got to get a whole lot more. I mean, everybody talks about the JMU guys for Indiana, and I thought they brought in 26, 28. Two of them have left, but it's not just the JMU guys. I mean, three or four of those guys have not been major contributors for most of the season. These other guys have been good too. The JMU guys helped a ton, but I think you also need to give credit to the guys that came from other schools because they were just as crucial. So those 10 guys from UNLV or however many it is will help, but you still got to fill out the rest of that roster. And like I said, they got a lot of work to do, and I don't think their NIL is great, but maybe they've improved it.
let's switch over to transfer portal talk to finish us out here, Matt. The portal opened officially for on Monday. Although we saw a bunch of players announcing they were going to be in the portal prior to Monday, we obviously have not heard anything on the Indiana front as far as guys leaving that we didn't already know were leaving. So I did see somebody put in a crystal ball prediction for Donovan McCulley to go to Michigan, so that'll be interesting. Hopefully it works out for him. But as far as Indiana goes, Matt, because they're in the CFP, it might put some guys in a tough position. They want to stay on the team and play in the CFP, but they also have to protect themselves and give them the best opportunity to go to, a good destination. The fact that we haven't seen any Indiana players enter the portal as of Tuesday, are you reading anything into that, or do you think it's just kind of the lay of the land with Indiana, still preparing for a playoff
Yeah,
game?
I did. I actually just Daniel Weems, the walk-on running back, did go in the portal today. That literally just happened. But I mean, and nothing against Daniel Weems, but obviously this is not a guy who's been playing a ton, and my guess is he's probably going to go down a level or two to play. Um, but yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not saying I thought there would be guys, but it is a little bit interesting because there are some guys that you wonder if they're going to stick around. And I'm not going to name names because I don't think that's fair to the players or the program. But all you have to do is look at the roster, look at guys who are kind of, I always say guys are like redshirt sophomores, maybe redshirt juniors, and maybe they were playing before and the new staff came in and their playing time got cut, or they were expected to maybe play more and they just haven't. Whatever it is, those are the guys you kind of look at. And if you look on the roster, there's a handful of guys that kind of fit that description. Maybe they're going to wait. Remember, I do think there is a rule, even if the portal's closed, I think they're the team that plays in the CFP when their season ends. There's like a window for their guys to go in the portal because if they want to stick through the CFP, they don't get penalized. I can't remember the exact rule, but I'm pretty sure even if they don't go now, they'll still have an opportunity once Indiana season ends, whenever that is. Um, and obviously, if they get beat on the 20th, the portal will still be open, so they'll have time. Um, but yeah, I'm maybe a little bit surprised we didn't see one or two, maybe three, four guys, but not shocked. I mean, the buy-in's been good, and that doesn't mean they're not going to have guys leave because I think they will. I think there, and I'm sure there's going to some guys they're going to have honest and frank conversations with. Not saying you need to leave, but hey, you're probably not going to play a ton, and that happens every year. That happened before the portal ever existed. That was always the thing. So it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think it'll be a ton of guys. I mean, like I don't know. I'll throw a number out there. I'll say maybe 5, 6. That's my guess. I don't think it'll be like double digits. If it is, I'll be a little bit surprised. But I think this will be a relatively quiet portal season for Indiana as far as guys exiting, in my opinion. I think the most of the guys who've left are the guys that are the ones that we're probably going to what I mean. That I don't know that you'll see a ton of other guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my thought too. Is the guys that left midseason were probably the ones that were gonna leave anyways. So, well, we'll see ultimately the number that comes out at the end of this. But I did do that transfer portal story last week, Matt, of the guys that left Indiana for other schools, and let me tell you, 95% of those guys who either transferred down a level or transferred to wherever FCS level, they didn't do anything at those schools. So I would, if guys end up entering the transfer portal that seem like important players right now, there's probably a reason they're entering the portal. And if you just look at what Indiana lost last year, they, yeah, the number of players they lost looks like a lot, but the players they actually lost in terms of production and impact was few and far between. I mean, Cam Camper, obviously, he had a good season at Boise State. Jaden McDonald had a good season at UConn, but, they're UConn. And, Zach Carpenter played all 12 games. He was an all ACC honorable mention at Mount Miami. But aside from those three guys, I might be missing one or two. The rest of the guys that I look,
How did Sorsby do at Cincinnati? I know
oh,
I know they struggled down the stretch and they didn't make a bowl game.
no, he was good. Yeah, he was definitely good.
Okay.
Yeah, he took that sophomore jump that you'd expect as a first time starter, well, full time starter. So yeah, those four guys though, outside of them, like nobody else really did anything of the guys that transferred out. So I would be hesitant to panic if a guy that's you think is a big name is transferring out, because if Signetti wants him at Indiana, he's gonna find a way probably to keep him here. So.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Last thing here, and I know you're going to do a more in-depth story on this with the transfer portal needs. Just generally, positions that Indiana you think are going to, pursue heavily right off the bat, and then maybe some positions that you think could, pop up as, things that it doesn't look like right now Indiana needs, but they might end up going after those that position more than people might think.
Yeah, I mean, on offense, I mean, they're going to get a quarterback, so you can put that as a need. I mean, receiver, we've talked about it. They've only got two guys back who caught a pass, and then Charlie Becker, who they really like, and I think he'll be in the mix next year. But you need to get some guys there. I think O line, even though you're going to get back, you should get back Bray Lynch, Carter Smith, Drew Evans, who have all played well this year. That's three stars. I've said it before. I think they need to get something in the middle. You've got some older guys. You got quite a few, guys in that redshirt freshman class. I think you need to get some redshirt sophomores or juniors, guys in that range to kind of fill out the roster. Defensively, I mean, D line, especially, and if McCall Kamara leaves, edge is going to be a big, big need. And then you're going to need a guy or two at D tackle. Linebacker's not a huge name, but they are recruiting some guys. A position, it's been really radio silent. And one thing that's been interesting is there's only been two guys in the portal who've tweeted that they have offers from Indiana. I would be shocked if that's the only two. But I don't know if part of me wonders if they're keeping everything really, really tight-lipped because they don't want people to know who they're going after. You know what I mean? Like they don't want it out there publicly because they're trying to maybe punch, and this is how I say this, punch above the weight class that Indiana normally plays in. They're trying to maybe go a little bit big game hunting. So they're trying to go after some guys, some dudes, and they don't want other people to know. That's what I'm wondering. I don't know, but it's been really real silent. People who normally talk aren't talking right now. But corner, and this is just, I'm going by follows, and I've reached out to some guys, and follows are a piece of the puzzle, but people too much into follows. Follows kind of help you narrow the list of players, but it's not necessarily who their top guys are. But they've really followed a lot of corners. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take a bunch of corners, but corner is a position where you don't lose anybody. You're not scheduled to. Now, there could be attrition in the portal, but nobody's a senior. Your top two or three, four guys are back. So that's kind of interesting to me. So I wonder if maybe they know they're going to lose a guy or two. I don't know that. I'm just wondering. And then obviously safety is another big one. They got to get some safeties because they lose a bunch of safeties. And Amari Farrell is the only guy with playing time back. Bryson Bonds has been a special teams guy. So those are kind of the positions. I mean, they're going to get somebody in almost every position, but the ones I mentioned are kind of the big priority ones.
Yeah. The timing is going to be weird now, obviously, with Indiana playing in the CFP. I wonder how quickly the turnaround is because obviously last year when Signetti came and the staff came, it was pretty much boom, boom, boom with Ellison, Rourke, those kind of guys committing right away. So we're probably going to be waiting a little bit longer. And the fact that you said, Matt, that you're basically not hearing anything right now from within IU about the portal probably says a lot about how they're approaching it this year. You'd think, right?
Yeah, I think so. I just think I just think they're being very quiet. I think that they're being cautious. I just don't think they want it out there who they're going after. And maybe they can even though they've had a great season, let's be honest, it's still Indiana. There's going to be somewhat of a perception about the program. I like I said before, we've said it. I don't think this is a fluke. I think they're going to be a good program for the foreseeable future, but there's still some perception they're probably fighting a little bit. And then also with the NIL and trying to get guys, if it gets out there, it hurts your leverage. It hurts your bargaining position as that's where you're at. This is like free agency. It is free agency. So I can kind of understand where they're coming from. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in. We know I think there's a retweet the running back from UAB, I believe. Um, the linebacker from Nebraska, I know somebody tweeted that he could be coming in, but I would expect probably, I don't know, 15 to 20 guys maybe this week spread over a few days. We'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I won't be shocked if going into next week they've gotten some commits from portal guys and they've started to shore up some of the positions that need to be shore up for 25.
So for right now, Indiana will obviously look ahead to the college football playoff. That's front and center in their mind now that they know they're going to be traveling to South Bend to play Notre Dame next Friday night, and then obviously portal work is just getting started here. So there's lots more to come on that front. Matt, thanks so much for joining me this week. This went a lot longer, this podcast did, than I thought it
Yeah.
would. Lot to talk about. So obviously not a bad thing here with Indiana football when we're this late into December and we're still talking about the Hoosiers. So. Um, the college football playoff will be a ton of fun. We'll have a more in-depth preview next week on Notre Dame. We'll give our predictions on that game, and then we'll have a lot more to come over on Peegs.com. Matt, thanks for joining me this week, and we'll talk to you folks throughout the week over on Peegs.com.